So because of YouTube's 15-minute video policy, I had to cut this video short, and I'm going to try my best to salvage as much as I can, showing you how a composition is composed and how it works. This should be quite a fun video for you to watch very soon. Today we're going to be looking at composition again, but more on the lines of ideation. I'm going to be addressing water bottles. These water bottles are going to be two-dimensional, so they are not going to be cylinders, they're going to be rectangles. But the idea is to create a whole list of varying kinds of illustrations that I can then show details and highlight areas. So let me try and do this as simply as possible for you to understand. So again, no warming up involved. This is straight from start. There's going to be no warming up with line weights, anything along those lines. And as always, I'm using a pro marker, so that every mistake I make is going to be visible to be seen. Now, there's no perfectionism in this game, which is very important. You should be able to understand that your mistakes can be very important tools, and your mistakes can dictate design in a lot of ways. So this should be interesting to see what happens. Okay. So in less than a minute, I've punched out 4 basic shapes that we're going to take through. Now, the question we need to ask is, what does a water bottle consist of? It generally consists of a top and a base, or a canister for the liquid to be held. So the question is working out how do you want to utilize that space and work out where the proportions are going to be. Where do you want the lid to be situated relative to the casing itself? So it's all a principle of balance. And at the same time, you want to work out if you're going to have a mouthpiece on the end, or if you're going to have a screw-on lid. So let's try a few things. First, let's play with angles. That's one way to always emphasize your thumbnails, is playing with angles and seeing what works best in what situation. So that'll be at an angle. This will, okay, I've got an idea. For this one, I'll give it a flip top. So what I'll do is I'll draw a very basic rounded circle and a cut off on the end. Now notice what I'm going to start doing, just for visual presence, I'm going to start drawing through all of these, which I think is a very good exercise. Being able to draw through your objects gives it a bit more character, and it also frees you up. Again, I didn't warm up prior to this exercise. This is all directly onto the page, and I think your warming up should be as loose as your sketches in the beginning. Okay, so let's get into a few more details. We don't know whether these bottles are clear or whether they are reflective, or if they're a certain material. So you can describe that in a few ways. First, let me just highlight this, because I find this quite an interesting feature. It's almost like a pelvis design. I don't know. That's quite interesting. I feel like this can stay the way it is. Now, when it comes to listing your ideas, it's always good to put a number underneath each one. So I'm going to do that to highlight what I like. And each feature, I mean, I really like this feature. This glass could be very interesting. So let's focus on the lids, because they are quite important. So as I said previously, this is going to be a flip top. So you want to emphasize some form of hinge that's going to be based here. So you could add a circle within a circle. Immediately that shows that there's some kind of indication. If I was focusing on this idea specifically, I would dedicate a bit more of the page to showing how the hinge mechanism would work. But for this, you get a good idea of the profile, where it has a lip that drops down and through. Now, since the aesthetic is kind of flat, this is the only area that's at an angle. So I'm thinking maybe emphasize that angle a bit more with a hand piece or a handle somewhere. So like I've said in my previous video, these kinds of drawings are all about exploration. There's never a wrong way of doing something. So just in that moment, I went from making it straight and vertical to something that's more conformed, and you get a lot of information from a side view. So just there, we've got a very interesting form. We've got some rigidity, we've also got some organic nature to it, which gives it a nice balance. This one will have a pull out top, you pull out with your teeth. So easy way to indicate that is to just give it a few more layers. You want to give it a bit more height and maybe an indication of what the pull out tab might look like. It's as simple as that. It doesn't need to be extremely complicated. This also has an angle going down, which is a bit weird anyway. And to make it a bit more interesting, what you can do, again, I'm going to add some diagonal shapes, but maybe mix it up in a few ways. So we've got 3 diagonal shapes. I do like the whole rule of 3 idea. Okay, so there we go. We immediately have something that's a bit more dynamic. A water bottle now conforms to your hand. It looks more like a sports bottle. Okay, next. What's this going to be? I think this can be more, I don't know, let's just see. Let's just draw stuff. Okay, maybe some kind of helix design to it. So you round off that edge, you round off that edge, maybe give it a tab along there, a tab along there. You can indicate all kinds of materiality. You can indicate that this is wrapping around the bottle. If I had been a bit more careful with my lines, I would have been able to hide a lot of the details. But in this example, you can see that there's a bit of conformity to the nature of the bottle, which is quite interesting. The handle's a bit organic. And the lid, I'm thinking the lid can be a pull-out tongue, or whatever you call them. It's got a pull-out piece that would fold in and out. Now, I would normally indicate with an arrow that it would go downwards, but it's okay for this. I want to keep these drawings nice and simple. I don't want to make them too overly complicated. But you see how I started with some very, very basic shapes, and through just playing with angles and a bit of curves, made 4 very distinct bottle designs. Now, the next step is to indicate materiality. So what I'm going to do is highlight that this is some kind of stippled rubber texture. So I'm just going to add some small dots on the surface, indicating that. You might want to indicate that this is high gloss. So all you do is indicate it with a small oval and a dot. It makes it reflective. How long has this taken me? This has taken me just over 5 minutes to illustrate 4 very basic shapes that have some kind of form to them. Now, in an exercise like this, to finish a drawing off, I would want to highlight one of these because I think that's very important. Now, to do that, I would attack it by hatching diagonally. So let's just do that to show you what it would look like. This is where your practice with hatching comes in handy, because you're able to get the spacing right. Spacing is very important with hatching. And it tightens up the drawing very well, as you'll see when this is finished. So I don't know what I would call this exercise. I would call this thumbnail ideation. I have no idea. But I hope you've taken something away from this technique. It's a method of being able to illustrate a couple of ideas very quickly and briefly. And of course, since I'm using a Copic or marker pen, might as well indicate that there's some color materiality to it. I think it's so great being able to use one pen for the entire drawing. It really makes makes it a lot easier, and it also makes you understand your mistakes, and you can correct your mistakes without anyone really noticing that you made mistakes in the beginning. You know, only you realize that you've made mistakes. The observer never understands. The observer never really fully comprehends whether you've made a mistake or not. So there we go, a nice and abbreviated 4 bottles that have been drawn under 10 minutes, and from this point you can pick and choose which one you enjoy. And when it comes to showing work to a client, the client would always choose this over the rest because, well, it's the most well explored, the most highlighted, the most detailed, which is a little trade secret. But anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this small tutorial on, I would say, thumbnail ideating, and I'll be showing you some more very soon. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.